everybody, welcome back to another I Care for Your Brain with board-certified neuropsychologist Dr. Karen Sullivan. We are starting year 6 of being committed to giving you free weekly evidence-based brain health information so you can be your very best advocate. Today is going to be a good one. I get asked about this product all the time. There are about 300,000 over-the-counter medications in the United States alone, and adults over the age of 65 make up the biggest user group. So about 65%, 60 to 65% of older adults, according to AARP, take at least one supplement and count on it, many of them, to help with brain health. So today I'm going to share with you what I tell my patients about the most popular brain health supplement on the market, Prevagen. Aren't you so curious to know what would be an unbiased, objective review of this drug? I'm very happy to have done a lot of background study for you today, and I'm simply repeating to you what information is out there already, which I then pass on to my patients as a neuropsychologist. So what even is Prevagen? Okay, this is the technical name for it is aquarin. Okay, this is a calcium binding protein that is modeled. It's actually not a jellyfish compound. It is modeled after a compound found in jellyfish that makes certain ones luminescent and gives them their ability to sting. It is a lab manufactured fermented synthetic version of this natural compound, and it's available in 3 strengths, as you probably know. We've got regular strength, which is 10 milligrams, extra strength, which is 20, and then we have professional strength, which is 40, and the price goes up per strength. So we can go from about $39.95 for 30 tablets, $59.95 for 20 milligrams, and $89.95 for the professional strength. So these are all 30-day supplies. In addition, they also come with 50 micrograms of vitamin D, which is interesting to note. They're also recently available in chewables if you have a hard time swallowing them. The company that makes Prevagen is called Quincy Bioscience, and they say if you take it within 90 days, so this is about $120 to a $270 initial investment, that's when you should see the benefits. Prevagen is considered both a dietary supplement and something called a nootropic. This is a new term for supplements that claim to improve cognitive function in healthy adults. There was an article that came out in 2019 in the Journal of American Medical Association by 3 University of California neurologists that said supplements are straying in what they call pseudo-medicine. This refers to supplements that exist within the law, but they are often promoted as being scientifically supported treatments, but lack credible data that they actually do anything, that they actually work. So within neurodegenerative diseases, the most common example of pseudomedicine is the promotion of dietary supplements to improve cognition and brain health. So the way Prevagen is promoted is that it is clinically shown to improve memory function. It is clinically proven to reduce memory problems associated with aging and result in a sharper mind and a clearer thinking pattern. So how does the company say it does that? Well, in 2015, what their website said was that during the aging process, human beings experience a loss of proteins that we need for healthy function, which leaves brain cells vulnerable to damage. And that Prevagen supports brain cells by supplementing the lost proteins with their patented ingredients, and claimed that the compound was capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier, right? It would have to be able to get into the brain to work and get through gastrointestinal barriers, entering the body through the nervous and the circulatory system. Beyond that, they actually didn't propose any what we call mechanism of action. So how does it actually work? How do you go from putting a pill in your mouth to getting a better memory? Hypothetically, there is a way it could work. So some researchers say Prevagen could potentially work and be an effective supplement for memory loss because if it is a calcium binder, it could reduce high levels of calcium in the brain, which can be toxic to neurons, especially in the hippocampus. So we've got a left and a right hippocampi, and this is the part of the brain where we make memory. So very, very important to what they would claim is the mechanism of action. So the ingredient in Prevagen is proposed to be a buffer of calcium, meaning that it's possible it could bind calcium in the brain when it's too much, decreasing abnormal levels. If this theoretical mechanism was correct, This would only be possible if Prevagen could be put in the mouth, survive the stomach environment, get into the bloodstream, cross into the blood-brain barrier, and preferentially attach itself to calcium binding receptors in the hippocampus. We would need 4 steps for this to be bioavailable. The first one, like I said, it would have to survive digestion, right? So it couldn't be broken down by high levels of digestive enzymes, stomach acids, gastric juices. Number 2, it would have to be absorbable by the bloodstream. It would have to actually get through this highly selective semi-permeable membrane we call the blood-brain barrier, which basically grants molecules and ions entry or denies them into the brain. It's a very sophisticated level of neuroprotection, and it's got some very specific criteria for what is actually allowed in. And it turns out it's got a lot to do with size of molecules and what we call its lipid profile. So whether or not it is hydrophilic or whether or not it is lipophilic. We would also have to see some specific calcium binding to the actual neurons in the hippocampus. So first question, can it survive digestion? What would you say about that? So we have a lot of enzymes in the gut, of course, to digest protein, specifically an enzyme called pepsin. In a lab study showing how Prevagen would potentially be processed in a simulated stomach environment, researchers concluded that it was broken down by pepsid within minutes. The authors further stated that even if it wasn't broken down by the enzymes in the gut, the ingredients in Prevagen would then be subjected to enzymes that are actually excreted from the liver, as well as metabolism from other cells, which would be 2 further threats to its bioavailability, its ability to get beyond the actual stomach. So what this means is there wouldn't even be enough compound left in the stomach to actually have any significant effect downstream. Researchers state that it's almost certainly true for a protein such as Prevagen that there's no way that it could really survive this type of acidic environment. One other study by Morell and colleagues suggested it was possible that cholesterol could potentially, theoretically, surround these molecules, get them through the gut, and help them get into the bloodstream. But the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation said, it's probably digested in the stomach, leaving nothing to get past into the blood-brain barrier. But let's just assume it gets past the stomach, the liver, and it makes its way into the bloodstream. Can it travel to the blood-brain barrier? Can it even get into the brain? Well, researchers have published their opinion that this is highly unlikely due to the size of the molecule. The mass of the molecule cannot cross the blood-brain barrier either through passive or active transport. Those are the only 2 ways things get in. So for a molecule to get actually into the brain, it has to be a pretty small size. So less than 400 to 500 Daltons. Molecules this size that can get through are things like nicotine, things like caffeine, and like I said, they have to have a certain lipid solubility. So the active ingredient in Prevagen actually has a considerable mass. It's a pretty big molecule, estimated to be 22,248 Daltons. So remember I said what can only get through has to be between 400 and 500, and now we've got a protein that is actually over 22,000. So that gives us a little implausibility there. And also the fat solubility profile of it is not likely to cross the threshold. So there is no research that I was able to find in dozens and dozens of hours of searching for you that there is any type of active transport system that would be capable of carrying these molecules over the threshold to actually get in the brain. And one journalist wrote that humans likely have not evolved a mechanism to transport such a big momentous compound that naturally exists and is synthesized in a jellyfish into the human brain. So let's just say, we're gonna again go on faith here, let's just say it can get into the brain, okay? Let's imagine. How would it actually preferentially impact the hippocampus, which would go on to improve memory? Well, calcium plays such a significant role in many brain functions. It has been described as implausible by scientists that Prevagen would actually know how to target brain cells in the hippocampus specifically. There's no way that it makes sense to people who research this that it would know how to go into that part of the brain specifically. So let's just say we are able to get it into the brain. Let's actually look at what is the clinical evidence for Prevagen. So clinical meaning, does it actually improve memory or cognition more than we would expect from just a sugar pill or a placebo? So the real issue with Prevagen, where the government has taken issue with them, is that they have relied on one self-funded study called the Madison Memory Study. So over a 2-year period, they performed an in-house, this is Quincy Bioscience, an in-house, yes, it was randomized, yes, it was double-blind, placebo-controlled, but they have relied on these findings to basically say it is a clinically proven supplement. During the trial, 145 participants, the ages of 40 to 91, received either a placebo or Prevagen. So 91 received 10 milligrams of Prevagen and 73 got the placebo. The first problem that the critics have with this is that Quincy did not follow standard scientific protocols, like determining ahead of time if they had the sample size and the adequate statistical power to identify clinically significant effect sizes in the group. So the main dependent variable, so we're looking at the effect of 10 milligrams of Prevagen or a placebo on something, that's called the dependent variable, was the results of 9 quantitative computerized cognitive tests from something they call the Cognistat brief battery. So they did it at 8 days, they did it at 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. And this was looking at verbal memory, executive function, psychomotor function, and visual learning. They also gave them a questionnaire to fill out called the 88, which helps us discriminate between signs of normal aging and mild dementia. Simply a subjective questionnaire, 8 items asking about things like memory, orientation, judgment, function, these kind of things. So the group has acknowledged that in their primary analyses, no statistically significant results were found. So at no point in any of the multiple time points on any of the 9 cognitive tasks did Prevagen result in any significant difference. After this was admitted, the team then went back into the data and did more than 30 unplanned post hoc subgroup analyses. This is not good science. This is not what people who are trained in the scientific method would be okay with. This is a classic self-serving, non-scientific approach to what we call data dredging. Some people call it p-hacking, where you go in and you do so many unplanned analyses that you're basically bound to find something by this kind of by any means necessary approach. So researchers have actually looked at this and they said, okay, let's assume we've got 31 subgroups, which they did. The chances of finding at least one false positive, if you set your alpha level to 0.05 significance level, is 80%. So using this approach, there was an 80% probability that they were going to find a false positive in the data. And sure enough, once they went through all these post hoc sub-analyses, they found something of significance. And if you look strong enough, you're going to find something. So this is why the standards of research methods exist. So you state ahead of time what is your hypothesis and which null hypothesis you will reject. The goal of science, of course, is objectivity, and confirmation bias accompany creating their own research protocol to analyze their own research results is probably going to be a conflict of interest. So what we call this is it's using a family-wise error or not using the Bonferroni correction. So basically the approach, the statistical approach that the makers of Prevagen used to prove it had cognitive benefits was very, very weak. So now what happens is the government and the FDA get involved and start to make some criticisms of Prevagen. So it starts in 2007 and goes all the way up to the last one I could find was in 2020. So per legal records, they're saying that the makers of Prevagen are profiting from untruthful and misleading advertising that claim Prevagen improves memory and cognitive function within 90 days. In 2012, the FDA sends the makers of Prevagen a warning letter saying that it's cited to report adverse events and product complaints that they received from users of Prevagen, and alleged that they failed to report adverse results. Now, this is something that we think about with supplements. So not only does it work, but is it actually safe? So the FDA said that there had been reports that had not gotten to them of strokes and seizures in the context of taking Prevagen. So this has resulted in several class action lawsuits. We had Races versus Quincy in January 2015. We had Collins versus Quincy in July 2019. But the big case came in January 2017 when a complaint for permanent injunction and other equitable relief was brought by the Federal Trade Commission and the state of New York. This was a consumer protection complaint, and it charged the company with making false and unsubstantiated claims. The company and the government went back and forth for 4 years. And in 2020, Prevagen folks moved for a class settlement that would give consumers an award ranging from $12 to $70 based on their investment. The government told Prevagen makers that they also had to stop advertising that Prevagen improves memory without providing adequate scientific evidence to support the claim or without qualifying them with a court-approved disclaimer. So in lieu of then resubmitting different data, they actually chose to use the approved disclaimer, which says, based on a clinical study of subgroups of individuals who were cognitively normal or mildly impaired, this product is intended not to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. And the New York State Attorney concluded the complaint by saying, the marketing for Prevagen is a clear-cut fraud from the label on the bottle to the ads airing across the country, providing none of the health benefits that it claims. So the big issue, the government said, is you can't rely on one study that is self-generated, that is flawed statistically. Journalists have also pointed out that there's never really been a mechanism of action that has been proposed by the makers of Prevagen, which is concerning because for something to work, you actually should know how it's having some kind of a positive benefit. And as of this month, January 2024, I could not find any independent or peer-reviewed clinical trials that I am aware of that support the health claims made directly by the makers of Prevagen. This remains very concerning to older adult consumer advocacy groups who say that this disclaimer that's on there isn't really going to make a difference because it's not really understood by the older adults who it is marketing to. So basically the big change was that they had to say it was based on a clinical study of subgroups of individuals. So what is the solution here? We have to talk about how to protect consumers more, especially older adults who potentially are cognitively compromised with decision-making abilities to weigh evidence in terms of quality. There was a 2021 article that I read I thought was very compelling called The Price of Predatory Marketing on Older Adults, a Perspective on Prevagen Potency, that basically said we should hold the Federal Trade Commission and the FDA to a higher standard. This should be expected and enforced when we are marketing to older individuals. We have to be extremely clear about what the scientific evidence is. If it's self-funded, meaning is it objective, more so than not. We have to understand the mechanism of action. So can Prevagen actually survive digestion? Can it penetrate the blood-brain barrier? And what clinically meaningful results does it actually have? So from the current research, it can be concluded in my review of the available evidence that oral consumption of this compound in Prevagen likely exerts an effect only as placebo, and no clear mechanism of function or any efficacy data exists that is even remotely compelling to me as a brain health provider. So can a protein originally found in jellyfish meaningfully improve human memory? The very clear answer is absolutely no. And this is just what I tell my patients when they ask me. I've actually sent people links to the government's lawsuits against Prevagen to see I don't have an axe to grind. I'm simply reiterating to you what has actually been published before. So we really need to revise the US dietary supplement regulations. We need to really value science in these instances. There was even a person in the FDA who came out and said what's really concerning from a public health perspective, this was the director of the Office of Dietary Supplement Program, Stephen Tate. He said what's really worried is not only is it a poorly regulated market, but the public actually thinks it is a well-regulated market. So if it's on the shelf and it's at Walgreens, it's at CVS, hey, something positive must have happened here to allow it to be on the shelf. And that's not necessarily the truth. It is not regulated for efficacy. There's another product that's out there called Nerugia. I think this is the girl Blossom, that actress. She is out there marketing it as a brain booster. They also recently settled a class action lawsuit and agreed to change all of their references from clinically proven and science proved on labeling to now it must say clinically tested and science tested. The problem is, who knows what the distinction of those two terms are, right? The companies cast what some researchers talk about as an aura of science, but it's not actually effective. So what actually works for brain health? You know, I try to never come to you too much as a negative Nelly. If something doesn't work, I want to let you know what actually works. Well, I'll tell you, I'm not a big believer in supplements unless you are actually deficient in something. What really works is what we call multimodal interventions. This is the combined effects of effortful behavior change across all aspects of ourself. Brain health is whole person health. And that is why in this upcoming year, 2024, we are going to be offering you, wonderful people, free brain health master classes, because I have a lot of material that I can be sharing with you, the public, who would significantly benefit from knowing what actually works, as opposed to relying on something that is not only a waste of money, potentially a waste of your hope. It's probably you're banking on it doing something it's not capable of doing. But also, if you're spending time thinking you're doing something good for yourself there, you're not spending time doing the other many things, the vast majority which are free, only really come down to you knowing better, knowing what to do. I feel like it is my obligation to share those things with you. So come back to us in the next few weeks. We're going to be announcing free master classes, one a month, 2024, probably over an hour in content each time, and you'll be able to get them all for free. So thank you guys so much, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.